Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's ViDevo. This morning we are picking up where we left off last Sunday in Mark chapter 3, starting in verse 20 and going to verse 34, which says this. Then Jesus entered a house, and again a crowd gathered, so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said, "He's out of his mind." And the teachers of the law who came down from Jerusalem said he's possessed by Beelzebul, another word for Satan, basically. By the prince of demons, he's driving out demons. So Jesus called them over to him and began to speak to them in parables. How can Satan drive out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. If a house is divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And if Satan opposes himself and is divided, he cannot stand. His end has come. In fact, no one can enter a strong man's house without first tying him up. Then he can plunder the strong man's house. Truly I tell you, people can be forgiven all their sins and every slander they utter. But whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit will never be forgiven. They are guilty of an eternal sin. He said this because they were saying he has an impure spirit. Then Jesus' mother and brothers arrived. Standing outside, they sent someone in to call him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they told him, "Your mother and brothers are outside looking for you." "Who are my mother and my brothers?" he asked. Then he looked at those seated in a circle around him and said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother." It's a pretty intense passage on a few different levels, right? But if we're to boil it all down to one key point for today, I would say this. Jesus is to be honored above all else. I mean, yes, he is grace-filled. Yes, he is compassionate. Yes, he loves us unconditionally. And yes, he has a sense of humor, and he's not against the right kind of fun within his boundaries. And he even considers us family if we follow him, like he says in this passage. But don't confuse any of that to mean that he's some kind of pushover that we can just treat however we want. Jesus is still the holy, perfect, powerful Son of God who will judge all of us one day. And he's someone to be honored above all else, even above family, as he himself models here. Which I know may hit you as extreme. It would have hit people back then as extreme, maybe even more so than us today. But Jesus says, no, should there ever be a time when you have to make a decision and you can't please God and your family, you have to pick one or the other. Jesus says, if that happens, you need to pick God. You need to pick God even over your family. So we need to be careful to honor him in how we view him as well and how we live. We don't get to tell him what to do, as you also see in this passage. We don't get to fit him in our little boxes like the Pharisees tried to do. And we especially need to honor him as God. You know, sometimes Christians will hear about things like Jesus says in this passage. They'll hear about the unforgivable sin, blaspheming against the Holy Spirit. And Christians will get kind of freaked out, like, well, what does that mean? Have I committed that sin? But Mark tells us, did you notice right here in this passage, Mark tells us what that is. He says Jesus said that because these guys were saying Jesus has an impure spirit. They were attributing what Jesus was doing to Satan rather than to God. And Jesus says, that's the unforgivable sin. Listen to the Holy Spirit when it tells you in your heart, no, Jesus is God and you need to honor him. He is the Messiah. He's someone to be honored and reverenced and even feared in a healthy way. You know, one nickname that the Bible has for Jesus is that Jesus is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And you think about lions. I mean, Amy and I got to go to the Sacramento Zoo a week or so ago, and Amy pointed out how this lion's paws were just so huge. They just looked powerful. And imagine, though, if that lion viewed you as his friend. You know, what would that be like? Knowing that, okay, I'm sure glad he views me that way, because I know anytime he chose, he could take me out like that. He could tear me to pieces. I'm grateful that he doesn't want to take me out, but I understand his power, and I maintain a proper fear and respect of that. And see, I think there's a reason the Bible refers to Jesus as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. If you're on his side, if you're part of his family, yeah, he's there for you. He looks at you as a friend, as family. But don't lose sight of who he is, what he is capable of. Maintain a proper, healthy fear and respect of him there. So, how can you honor Jesus today? In class, in your free time, with what movies you watch, or TV shows you watch, or books you read, in how you treat others, how you treat your family, what video games you play. Man, today and every day, let's take Jesus seriously and let's honor him like he deserves.